Good afternoon. Thank you for this opportunity to address you today. It has been increasingly evident that the process of directed change is associated with greater inequality for the bulk of humanity. What should be the mission of development communication, or DevCom, in the face of these contemporary realities and challenges? What are the ways in which we can visualize the mission of development and change, and B, reconstruct or expand the role of DevCom to better meet contemporary challenges in directed change processes and outcomes? At the dawn of the 21st century, the neoliberal paradigm of directed change has brought new challenges to progressive change. In the last 40 years, the rise in income inequality and individual opportunity has seen a dramatic increase globally. The period matches well with the establishment and the ascendance of the neoliberal policy regimes around the world. Neoliberal discourse enshrines the freedom of the individual to serve a free market, planning by the state to achieve agreed upon objectives and ensuring the social welfare of its citizens is increasingly seen as an attack on individual freedom. This is a perverse kind of freedom that negates the freedoms associated with cooperative forms of organization and structure, commons, and community life. So, what are the alternatives to neoliberal models of directed change? What should be the place and role of DevCom in these alternative models? Prior to answering these questions, I would like to first provide an alternative vision of development that we should be striving for. Increasingly, the idea of development towards social justice outcomes is finding common ground among scholars and professionals. I agree with this view and conceptualize development as a process of directed social change with the articulation of social justice as its objective. However, while the term social justice connotes a fairly common understanding at the conceptual level, its operationalization has been a bit of a challenge. What is social justice and in social change, and what are the ways in which it may be operationalized? Scholars such as Giddens have talked about freedom from inequality and servitude, also called as emancipatory politics, which is his first dimension of what social justice is supposed to be, and freedom to explore one's individual or group potential and live an effective and meaningful life as an expressive human being, also called as life politics, which is the second dimension of what social justice should be. So I'm sensitized to the idea that social justice involves not only freedom from the effects of unequal development, but also freedom to enhance the capacity and the capability of each person to live a meaningful life. So getting back to the earlier question of what are the alternatives to neoliberalism, a historically important vehicle for active and radical engagement has been the social movement. Successful social movements include the labor movement, the movements for individual rights and liberties, including democratic choice, peace movements, civil rights movements, feminist movements, eco-related movements, and so on. And contemporary challenges have spawned other civil society movements. Civil society movements are anchored in specific issues, and they represent constituencies that may be local, global, or global. I will examine varied and overlapping movements for social justice, including anti-authoritarian movements, NGOs, non-governmental organizations working for progressive change, activist networks for change, and others, to understand the nature of their work, their ethics, and their methodologies, and also to learn the best practices of social and political action towards the achievement of social justice outcomes. But another important objective for me is to distill from these movements the roles and outcomes of communicative actions in directed change, thereby documenting the important roles media and communication can play in oppositional programs and other radical engagements for social justice. Let's look at the anti-authoritarian social movements briefly. These movements are comprised of anarchists and autonomists. Anarchists are activists. They are anti-statist, anti-capitalist, anti-globalization in their orientation, and they believe in radical actions to bring about directed change. The anarchist praxis includes decentralized organization, mutual aid, voluntary forms of association, and direct action. They seek alternate futures through direct action, which could include demonstrations in public places, protests, other forms of resistance communication, and practices such as squatting in public places, creating oppositional communities, self-help cooperative projects, civil disobedience, self-defense, teach-ins, marches, vigils, and so on. And going over to non-governmental organizations or NGOs, today there are thousands of NGOs involved in activities that include providing direct services such as family planning, healthcare, housing, water, sanitation, medical aid, foreign aid, disaster aid relief, environmental justice, and the list goes on and on and on. The communicative actions of NGOs comprises advocacy communication, campaigns, information politics, social mobilization, media mobilization, participatory action, lobbying, expanding the independent public sphere, education, local cultural production, developing critical consciousness, resistance communication, shaping public opinion through powerful media campaigns, active networking with grassroots groups, and targeting policymakers at national, global levels, and much, much more. Technology is another important player here. Reed's law states that the utility of a social network increases exponentially on the internet, thus providing users with a very powerful vehicle for activism. Local activism, therefore, these days has the potential of rapid geographic dispersion through digital networks, leading to multiplier effects. Following Giddens' ideas and operationalization of social justice and distilling the communicative actions of progressive organizations and movements, I will now present a conceptual and also probably an operational model to describe the roles of DevCom, or the roles that DevCom could play to address and counter inequality and injustice in directed change. In this POD framework, social justice outcomes are operationalized on the extreme right side of the figure under the broad categories of freedom from inequality and freedom to explore one's individual or group potential to live a meaningful and satisfying life. The POD framework that you see presents goals expected in directed change efforts that facilitate social justice outcomes. I have put that on the extreme right under Phase D. and outcomes expected from communicative actions, which is under phase O, which would constitute the means or processes by which the directed change goals under phase D may be achieved, sustained, or strengthened. And the principal communicative actions that you see in the second column there under phase P, by which the outcomes desired by DevCom, which is phase O, may be realized. The new avatar for DevCom is operationalized in phase P of the POD framework. It brings together the traditional as well as radical communicative actions from areas such as participatory action research, community organization, action, and other related models. They include social mobilization, media mobilization, community mobilization, advocacy communication, information politics, empowerment-related communication, network for social and political action, and resistance communication. In conclusion, despite many ongoing progressive movements, neoliberal agendas remain hegemonic. As we enter the 21st century, the challenge of unequal development in our communities continues to be intractable. The outcomes of various alter globalization, anti-globalization, progressive people's organization, and coalitions have not had much success in transforming the political and economic power structures towards the goal of social justice. But DevCom can and should find ways to make use of networks and progressive social movements to assist local communities. Thank you.